Thank you, Mr. Official, for coming out here to do oral history with you. So to start off, where were you born?
I was born in Seattle, Washington. And when I was 1, I moved to Portland, Oregon. And when I was about 2 or a little bit older, I moved to Union Grove, Wisconsin. I did this because my father was working in the Weather Bureau, and he was a data gatherer who went out into the rural areas to check on weather stations that are set up all over the states. And when I was about 3, we moved to Oak Creek, where I lived for the next 9-10 years.
And could you describe what your family was like?
Well, I was the 3rd child. I had an older brother and an older sister. After me, there were 4 other sisters. They were born probably every 2 years, roughly, from me. So when we all were living in Oak Creek at one time or other, all 7 of us.
Yeah. And then in Oak Creek, where did you go to school in your childhood and through your grade school?
Well, we went to Saint James Parish School, which was about a mile away on 27th Street and Rawson Avenue. We lived on Rawson Avenue, which is a county highway. Was at the time there weren't many major roads at all, so about every mile there was a road, starting on College, then Rawson, then Drexel, then Putes Road, then Ryan Road, then Oakwood Road. So every mile there was a road, and that's how the counties were designed. And there was cross streets, 27th Street, 13th Street, and then Howell Avenue. And that was pretty much the cross streets.
And then you went to high school here at Marquette, that's correct?
That's correct.
What would you say is your fondest memory from your time in high school?
Oh boy, I had a lot of good memories. I would have to say probably junior or senior prom.
Would you care to tell us about that?
Well, just that they were nice events. I was fortunate to have a lovely girl that I dated or took to it. I don't know if I necessarily dated these afterwards, but enjoyed the time. The junior prom was held here in the cafeteria, and senior prom was held at the War Memorial downtown.
So then in high school, were you involved in any activities within the school?
Yes, I was. My freshman year, I played football on the freshman football team. I tried out for baseball but didn't make the team. But I was involved in the newspaper and the yearbook, and I ran for a student council president but was not elected. I became the chairman of the communications department, or the communications committee of the student council. At the time, there was we started a new newspaper because the Flambeau Monthly was literally every month, but we had a newspaper which was a legal size piece of paper printed on both sides called the hoi polloi, which means the people. And we put that out. It was run on mimeograph, and we put that out every week. There was a group of us, and then we also worked on the Flambeau. And then a lot of the things I did, I just transferred over to help on the Flambeau yearbook. I was editor-in-chief at least 1 or 2 years, I think. I can't recall. And but did that. I was also involved in the inter-high school newspaper association. We had a group of students from all the Catholic high schools that formed a little council to help train and communicate with each other during our high school years.
So then high school and then middle school, did you have any jobs when you were a kid?
Okay, when I was growing up out in Oak Creek, there was a lot of farm work to be had if I wanted, and I started out picking asparagus when I was 9 years old, and did that after school. Take the bike over. It was about a mile in the other direction from my school, and my brother worked there, so it was the owner of the farm also supplied eggs to the family, so they were known very well, and we were known. But so I worked there starting when I was 9. Unfortunately, they had to let me go because the law changed that year, and they raised the minimum age for farm workers to 10. So he couldn't let me work there anymore because he paid me, an hourly wage, which was 50 cents an hour. The wage was going up to 75 cents an hour so I went at that point and did piecework, which wasn't forbidden by the law because you didn't get an hourly wage. You got paid for how much work you did. So I picked strawberries, and I picked corn, and I picked tomatoes. So those are the things I did during grade school. The following year I went back and picked asparagus, and then went and picked some more tomatoes and corn after the asparagus season was done, because that usually got done the end of June. It's because it got too hot otherwise. And then in high school, or once I left Oak Creek, which I did when I was in the 7th grade, I was roughly 12. We moved into the city of Milwaukee, Bayview, and then I got a paper route and delivered the Milwaukee Journal. When I went to Marquette here, I did help out in the bookstore as a to gain some credit against my tuition for school here.
So then in high school you went to Marquette. So what was like the culture of the high school at the time?
The culture, I don't know what it's like today, but we found out, at first, very few people knew each other because we came from all over the city and actually the county. But it didn't take long before, we got to know each other from whatever activity it was, even if it was simply lunchtime, We went to Mass every day, so that helped. When we came to school, we sat in the auditorium. That was the preschool place to be. We were divided by grade level. There was 8 grades or 8 divisions, depending on how smart you were or how smart you excelled with your grades, and they kept that for 2 years, and some of the people left after 1 year because it was too tough. The curriculum was very strict in that regard, but it was very open as well.
And so then you graduated high school in 1967 or 68?
67.
What can you say about sort of your thoughts and sort of your interactions with the world's events at the time? I mean, things like civil rights, Vietnam.
Well, at the time in high school, there was more civil rights oriented. There were, marches for the open housing. Father Grappi led those. There was, we only had one black African American in our class. He was, and what we did get to know him and some of his friends, and interacted with some of the students in other schools, like Holy Angels, which was separate from Holy Angels Divine Savior. And so we did some things, just discussions of the events of the day at the time. We didn't, or I didn't participate in any marches or anything like that. When I went to Marquette University, there was a little bit different. The Vietnam was very much a part of the activities of the world, but the civil rights were still, involved. I worked for one of the committees at Marquette University, and I'm trying to remember the civil rights activists who came in at Marquette University, and Father Grappi brought his whole march to the student union at Marquette, and that was quite a spectacle, to say the least. And all I remember is I don't know the gentleman's name, but he was a comedian, a black comedian that spoke, but he spoke about civil rights. And during the Vietnam, there was not a lot happening at Marquette University. There was some, but most of it was in Madison, and I believe it was my junior year at Marquette University. They had a shooting in Madison, and so they closed the Marquette campus down early, and that was an unusual event for that to happen, and so closed up classes. Back earlier, the civil rights movement got violent in the basically the inner city, which was along 3rd Street from roughly Walnut to Center Street, and they had a lot of gunfire, fighting, shootings. I don't know if there was people killed or not, but the city was shut down, literally. They closed the city for anybody to come in, whether you lived there or not. And so it really was an unusual event. I know one of my experiences is that I wasn't aware of it, and I actually got up to go to work, which was out in Oak Creek, working on a highway construction, and I needed some gas, so I went to the gas station that I knew would be open because it was always open 24 hours a day, and waited for the gas attendant to come and pour gas because we didn't do it ourselves back then. And all of a sudden I'm surrounded by policemen. And, didn't know what was going on. Of course, they were, "What are you doing here? Where are you going?" All this other stuff. And I said, "Well, I'm going to work. I needed gas. And they said, you didn't know that there was a curfew? And I said, no, because of course this was 6 o'clock in the morning. And we didn't turn the television on before we went to work, so they escorted me back to my house and said, stay home. So I literally stayed home for the next, I want to say it was probably 5, 6, 7 days before they opened up the city.
Then going back to when you were in high school and during the times, do you remember events such as the Kennedy assassination or later the other assassinations of RFK or of Martin Luther King?
Well, I do remember Kennedy's assassination, John Kennedy's assassination. I was a freshman here, and it happened during, I believe it was probably the 5th or 6th hour in the afternoon. I was in directed reading, and they made an announcement over the system to, that what happened, and the first thing we did is say prayers for him. And so for the next couple of days, all the classes were watching the events of the funeral and everything else going around, the political things that were going on with that. I'm trying to remember where I was when Dr. King got assassinated, but I don't recall if I was in school or not during that period of time. Same thing with Bobby Kennedy. I knew about them, but they weren't, let's say they weren't, the school didn't shut the school down because of that.
So then for college, you mentioned that you went to Marquette University.
Yes.
And so that was during the time of Vietnam.
Correct.
And so did the draft affect you in any way during that time?
Well, I was eligible for the draft when I started school, but because I went to the university, they allowed for student exemptions for the first 4 years. Well, actually, you could, if you were in a university, you could be exempt from the draft. And so I did not, I had to enroll. Well, you did that when you were 18. And what happened then is that I applied for a medical deferment, because I had an ear issue from high school. And the last day of classes, I got my 4F, which was a medical deferment. So I didn't have to do that. And one of the things that happened when I was, I think it might have been a sophomore, but they went to a lottery for the draft. So everybody got their birthday selected, and a number associated with that was the order in which you were drafted, if you became eligible. And the year that I would have been eligible, they had already passed my number, so I would have went in pretty much right away. One of the things I didn't mention that dealt with the Vietnam was was it the Milwaukee 7 or the Milwaukee 10? I don't know which one it was, but there was a group of a priest, a couple of priests, and other people who burned draft cards downtown, and they made a event. I don't know exactly when that was, but it had a lot to do with Vietnam. I don't know if it was, around 1970 or, somewhere in there. But that was, and I knew some of those people who did that. They all you know, protested, got arrested, and you know.
So did you know anybody who went to Nam, or anybody?
I had a lot of friends that went to Vietnam. I had a couple of friends that didn't come back from Vietnam, that you know, were good friends of mine. They never went to college. They just went right into the service. I even had a couple of friends who came back. One was blind, and another one had probably the best thing to describe it as PTSD, and he ended up committing suicide when he came back. And a lot of other, you know, friends and acquaintances came back injured, or so it was a very, very, you know, trying time in that regard.
So did you so do you remember any protests that happened during that time?
In addition to the burning of draft cards.
In addition to that,
Yeah.
there was one, and I don't know exactly what, because I was not involved, but it was done at Marquette, or, you know, I don't know if it ended up, but they, I remember they had a group that was around, I believe at the time it was the law school, which was where the president of the university lived in, you know, this home or whatever that was next to the law school. So that's where it ended up. I wasn't involved in it at all. I was living on campus at the time. I was living north of the campus, but still able to, you know, see what was going on. You know.
Yeah. And then I guess, so moving on from college, what was your first job after graduating, and after you got your 4F?
Well, probably, well, when I graduated, I went back. Okay, let's start over. My first job after that was teaching journalism, which I had a degree in, at a high school, Whitnall High School, but it was only one class a day. And I also was the moderator for the school newspaper. So that was my first year out of school. At the same time, I went back to school to get my education credits so I could get a license to teach. And at the same time, I attended bar. So those were, you know, some of the things that I did. At the time, I did a lot of part-time things.
Yeah. And then after you mentioned to us before that there was a sort of special system going on at the high school that you were teaching at. Can you tell us some more about that?
Special. Go ahead.
Well, so did you have any teaching jobs at any other places?
Well, that was, you know, kind of like a permanent job, but I also substitute taught at various places, both outside the city and also within the city. But then I had part-time jobs. I was a newspaper, a student newspaper evaluator. Did that through Marquette University School of Journalism. I did some work for the Germantown School District in public relations. I took photographs of things going on, their activities, and wrote a newsletter for them. That was part-time though. I think that's, you know, combined with the bartending, and, you know, I sold the World Book encyclopedias. That was, again, another part-time thing. So I did lots of things to keep busy and to make some money.
And then, didn't you also have a job in Illinois?
Yes, that was after I got married, which was in 1973. I moved to Illinois to take a job at a year-round school district called the Valley View Schools. And my job was public relations. And part of that job was to educate people from around the country about how the year-round school worked. And that was a very unique, it was the first of its kind in the country. And it was very successful because it was a constantly evolving kind of organization. And so I would bring in the educators from around the country, explain the system, and then I had set up appointments with them to speak to various faculty administrators that they were associated, and that was part of my job. And so I also put out some weekly and monthly newsletters and also news stories as they occurred within the school. I wrote for the local newspapers and submitted them to do that. After that, the funding evaporated, and so I stayed there for a couple of years and taught in the high school.
After the funding evaporated, did it stay a year-round school?
Oh yes, it did. It isn't now, but I don't know exactly when it stopped. The reason that went to year-round school was that the student population was growing so fast they couldn't bring or build the schools fast enough. And so they made a strong effort to subdivide where all the students were and create, every, you go to school for 90 days and then you have 30 off. Go to school 90 days, have 30 off. And they rotated that, so always there was one group that always was off.
Sure. So, what would you tell the people who are interested in this new education system? What would you try and sell them on, or what were the benefits?
Well, the benefits was being able to educate everyone without, sending them somewhere else. That there's all local. So that was the biggest in what they wanted to do, is they wanted to keep everybody local. And the teachers had no problem with it because they could work their normal schedule, which was roughly 180 days, or they could work 240 days if they wanted to, or anywhere in between. So some of the teachers actually taught year-round as well, and not taking any days off at all. They just, the normal vacation times. But it was meant to keep the students local and, let's say, and educate them, and not have any inconsistencies with that. And actually, in some instances, not having that 3 months off in the summer actually helped. If they had every 30 days, they would have a break. That actually helped them learn or keep the learning.
Right. So how well did this system spread?
I'm sorry?
How well did the system of year-round schools spread?
Well, it where it was needed, there was used. I mean, I can't say it was, widely used because, of course, the situation for it to happen wasn't as prevalent around the country. There were some places, there was I think in California there was a number of school systems that did it. There was one around Denver, and they adapted it as they could or needed to, but it wasn't always as pressing of a need in other places as it was there, which was southwest of Chicago at the time, and was, a booming subdivisions at the time.
So then, around when did you move back to Milwaukee?
It was in 1977 or 76, 77. Summer is when I moved back to Milwaukee.
Can you tell us about what prompted that move?
Primarily, both our families, my wife and my families, were both from the Milwaukee area. We had one child at the time, and we were very close with our families. And so it took a 2-hour drive to get from our place to Milwaukee, and that was getting tedious. So with that, we were financially able to do it, so we just said, okay, and bought a place here, a home, and then moved back here.
And then, upon that move, what was your first job after that?
Well, at the time, my wife worked for the phone company, and she had a full-time job. I had a bunch of part-time jobs again. I tended bar. I substitute taught. I did a little, writing for a couple of, groups or organizations. And then about in 1979, I got a job with the Postal Service, which is where I stayed the rest of my career.
What was it like working for the post office at that time, before sort of not mass transit, before widespread internet and when everything was mail?
Yeah, well, true. Everything was mail, and it was a very sought-after job. Paid well, had benefits, which there weren't that many jobs out there. I had to take an exam, which was basically how well can you memorize, But it was everyone took the exam, and that's how the grade of that put you in line for a job. And it took me about, I want to say 6 months after taking the test before I got called in to see if I wanted to work. And one of the things that when I started working, one of the things that you first came to realize was that it was a job that you had to do no matter what. In other words, if it was snowing, raining, freezing, it didn't matter. I was a letter carrier, and you went out and carried mail, whatever the case may be. And a lot of people, even then, didn't like the fact that that was a tough job in regards, so they quit. They wanted something simpler, easier, less strenuous, But that's, I stayed on and then went into management and till I retired.
And then in Milwaukee, do you remember when the Braves were still in Milwaukee?
Oh yes, very much so. Matter of fact, one of my teammates on my freshman football team was the son of the general manager of the Braves. And I used to go there as a young man from Oak Creek, and it just seems, a lot that a friend or two of mine would go with me, and we would take the bus we had to walk about 1.5 miles to get to the bus stop. And then we take the bus down to what was now National Avenue, then took another bus over to where the VA is, and then we walked through the VA down to the old county stadium. And but I did that when I was very young, and I'd get there. We'd get there 10 o'clock in the morning before anything was going on. But we did that primarily to get autographs of the Braves that were coming in, the players that were coming in. And so I was, fortunate. I had a lot of heroes, Warren Spahn, Eddie Matthews, Lou Burdett. So, getting an autograph. I had a baseball glove that had a whole bunch of them. Of course, being a dumb kid that I was at the time, I still used the glove, and a lot of the autographs got smeared and worn off. But that's what I did because, that was my glove. It's all I had. And but I even got one time we got in free because Harvey Keene, the manager, basically walked us into the stadium and said, just stay out of the way of the ushers and, have fun. So.
Then also growing up in Milwaukee, did you have any experience with highway construction in the city?
Well, when I was growing up, the main highway, when I moved from Union Grove to Oak Creek, the main highway was Highway 41, which was 27th Street, and there was no expressways back then. So when probably around 1960, 61, somewhere in there, that's when they started building expressways. And I was the expressway coming up from Chicago, that the place where we lived, which was a row of 40 homes, identical homes, that was a post-World War II subdivision. It was all in a line from 20th Street to 13th Street. That was in the way of the expressway because that was where they were going to do an interchange, an off-ramp and an on-ramp. So all 40 homes were bought and sold and torn down. And that's why I moved into Bayview, because of, that construction. And then, so that, took place, but it kept going on because it was a yearly, they just expanded, and did things year by year. Well, when I was graduated from Marquette High, I got a job during the summer with the state Department of Transportation, basically a surveyor. And I would go out in a surveying team, and my first job was between College Avenue and and Drexel, and reconstructing Howell Avenue. And that was a major thing because the intersection of Howell Avenue and Rawson Avenue was on top of a WPA project. It was a bridge, and the intersection was on top. Underneath it ran what used to be the Milwaukee Road, which at the time was a major, connection between Chicago and Milwaukee. And but they had to tear that down because it was, just not adaptable into what they wanted to do for Howell Avenue. I think 2 contractors went broke trying to tear it down, and the third one, finally, realized how to do it. They had to blow up the bottom and then attach cranes to it to hold it up so they could cut with torches all of the steel bars. It was built. It was not, the WPA built stuff that was not going to fall down, and this was one of them. And then the following year, I worked for the Highway Commission again, and we were working on extending Howell Avenue from where we left off at Drexel to the county line at Oakwood. And again, doing the same kind of things. It wasn't as bad. There was a few obstacles in a way that had to be taken care of. But the biggest obstacle was we started working, and all of a sudden there was a concrete strike. And it shut down all the construction, road construction, and then other, building construction too, but primarily road construction. It didn't end until sometime in the fall. So I worked, but we redid things, and it was a very boring job because we didn't have anything to do.
So then moving from Oak Creek, which is more rural, and to Bayview, which is more urban, was there any changes that you noticed from moving from Oak Creek to Bayview?
The most sort of the big differences between where you grew up as a child and where you live as an adult?
Well, one of the things that when I was in Oak Creek, there never was an issue of safety. We were out all the time. I rode my bike everywhere, and I'm in places that and did things that I didn't even think about whether they were safe or not. And but there wasn't any public transportation out there either. The closest bus stop was like 1.5 miles away. The road traffic was not as heavy as it might have been in the city. So it was just a little didn't worry about any of things like that. When I got into the city, then the traffic got a little heavier. You worried, and of course I was getting a little older, so I was maybe paying attention to the news, and there was more thought process of safety issues. Although I still did things like Hitch Hike, and I took the bus to come to Marquette, which meant going downtown every day and then out from downtown to the school. And so there was, differences, not so much critical as far as safety goes, but I noticed that there was other issues there that pertained to safety.
So then you mentioned hitchhiking to school. So is that the primary form of getting to high school?
Well, not the primary form was bus, but if I was standing on a corner waiting for a bus, my thumb went out. So if I get a ride, it's to save me the time of waiting, for the bus and then getting on the bus. And so a lot of times depend on, what time of day, what the weather was like. I got a lot of rides, from the corner of Oklahoma and Kinnickinnick down to downtown. Then I could hop the bus, going up Wisconsin. And the same thing after school. There would be a dozen or so of us outside on Wisconsin Avenue with their thumbs out, and the people who came by, if they, had the availability to, pull over so we could jump in, they knew we were at a good school and this wasn't troublesome people, and I think that's part of the other issue. They never, they weren't afraid of the people who were hitchhiking. They knew at least that they weren't bums or possible thieves, so they were more acceptable to give rides at that point.
Yeah. Do you have any other experiences or stories you can share about hitchhiking or things that you did?
No, not really. I just met people that were able to give me a ride, and I was thankful, and There wasn't any, I didn't have any weird experiences at all, so that was good.
Yeah.
So then going back to your college experience and with draft photos, you said that you knew some of them personally. So could you elaborate on that?
The people that
That protested the draft by burning their cards.
boy, I can't recall any individuals at this point. Yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't. I knew them at the time, and but I can't recall who they are. If I got the list of them, I probably would. Okay, this is his. But I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries. I think we're gonna take a real quick pause.
Okay.
Living out in Oak Creek, that's obviously more rural and it was more isolated setting. So, what was it like? You have to travel into the city, or what did you do for that?
Well, in order to do just grocery shopping, we had to go almost 8 miles to get close to a grocery store. There weren't many to begin with, and we had to go to what was Southgate. I think now it's a Walmart over on basically 27th and Morgan, and they just didn't have many. I know we're probably about 5 miles from South Milwaukee, and I think the year that I moved out of there, they built a grocery store in South Milwaukee, so we could go there. But again, it was 5-6 miles to get there, and that basically had to do with almost anything you needed. They didn't have stores that were close, so you had to travel to get to those places. For us, if we wanted to do, shopping, shopping, we'd go from Oak Creek to Mitchell Street, which was another 3-4 miles, and that's where all of the stores were, the shopping stores, the Gimbels, the Schusters, the Woolworth's drugstore, and things of that nature. So that was quite a challenge. One thing we did have, though, that they couldn't even have in the city, was that we had a outdoor theater, the 41 Twin Outdoor Theater, which was kind of one of a kind because it had a screen on either side. And if you're not familiar with outdoor theaters, they basically projected movies. The screens were probably easily 50 feet by 100 feet, and but there was the 41 Twin was about a mile away, and they had one thing that my family took advantage of, is in that they had carload night. So you would, how many ever people were in a car, you all got in for one flat price, no matter what it was. I don't, could have been $10, $5. I have no idea at the time, but I didn't have to pay for it. But we saw some great Western movies then, and other things too, back in the day.
What kind of films? Any specific ones that you'd recommend to us?
Oh, well, I was a Western fan. I still am a Western fan. So there was a lot of, I can't even remember the names of them, but those were the ones that we saw at the 41 Twin, back in the day.
What kind of other pop culture was sort of big at that time?
Well, rock and roll was basically starting. Now, back when I was growing up in Oak Creek, we had a radio in the kitchen. It only was AM because that's all they had. So WOKY was the AM station that had rock and roll on it. And so that's what we listened to almost all the time. And the the when TV started coming on, because I think I was in first grade when a neighbor got a television, and we would go there after school and sit in their living room and watch television. But even back then, television didn't start until 3 or 4 o'clock. They closed off at midnight, and then they didn't broadcast. So there was no morning broadcast or afternoon or anything like that. But as things progressed, and when our family got the first television, of course, always you're all sitting in the living room because that's where the big television was, and we watched. I lost the name, but the music shows, the dance shows that were on. Dick Clark, Ed Sullivan, Perry Como, all of those people had variety shows where they have all kinds of acts on. The Beatles were the first place they were seen on television was the Ed Sullivan Show, and those things were how you discovered them, and Dick Clark would always have a live group. I don't know if it was every day, but on Saturdays I think they'd have one live group besides playing all of the records and that. I do remember when the Beatles came to Milwaukee for the first time. I was going home from school here. I went to it was I think 1964, and there was a right now it's a dorm for Marquette University. It's on roughly 21st, 22nd in Wisconsin. It used to be a hotel called the Coach Inn, and that's where they were staying. Well, it was literally surrounded by screaming girls everywhere, both sides of Wisconsin Avenue. The next door to it was the old mansion that was the home of the Archbishop at the time, but they were, covered that grass, and they were just screaming. I don't know if they were there or not, but the girls always, they knew where they were going to go, but it was a unique experience. I drove the bus down Wisconsin Avenue watching all of them, and I say, crazy girls.
Can I ask, were you a Beatles fan or a Stones fan?
Probably more Beatles than Stones, although I liked them all. One of the things that I did when I was in high school was they had an organization in Milwaukee called the CYO, Catholic Youth Organization. Did a lot of things, had sports leagues, had different competitions. But one of the things they did was the parishes that had them, because they were associated with a Catholic parish, was they had dances. And so it was like coordinated. There was always a different parish in your neighborhood that every Friday or Saturday night, but primarily Fridays, there would be dances, and with live music. And that's one of the things that I did for my CYO, was that I would book the bands for the dances. And so that was, trying to get good bands that had good reputations, and, met some interesting people that, played well,
Do any of those experiences or memories stick out to you?
Not off the cuff. There was nobody famous,
Sure.
but there was a lot of fun, and the CYO did well because everybody was charged an admission price, whatever it was, 50 cents or $1 or something, and we covered our expenses.
Nice. Yeah.
So were those bands just local bands, or were they?
Pretty much local bands, yes. You know, the local bands had they would make the circuits, different CYOs, and so some bands were better than others. All of them were what do they call them? Copy bands.
Cover bands.
There was no original music at all. But they learned the Beatles and they learned all the Stones and whatever else was going on. Yeah.
What about some other like who were like just your favorite musicians as a sort of a young adult, like in college recently after?
Oh boy. Well, I liked bands that had horns, and Chicago was a big favorite of mine. And there was another group, I can't recall the name though, but they were a little more local, but they also had horns, and so I would follow them around. They played various clubs in Milwaukee that had dance or performance venues. They didn't usually, at least not that I'm aware of, they had concerts where you go to a stage place, that you sit in a seat or something. These were just bars that had space for dancing, and a band to play. So, but that's who I was more enjoyed.
Then did you ever go to any festivals or like fairs or anything?
Well, at the time there was, and there still is, a lot of church festivals, and that was very, very popular. I know the one in Saint James I used to go to pretty much during high school. I'd go back there after I moved because my friends would be there, and it was a good place to go and to enjoy. I wasn't a big fan of Summerfest, although it started I think when I was in high school. But we'd go to the church festivals and those kinds of things. They also had some the South Milwaukee Music Festival, things like this. They would have the Cudahy had a festival too, and so there's various things like that we'd always go to. They'd be either 1 or 2 days, and just some place to go hang out and listen to music and get something to eat. See a lot of people.
Just like church festivals, what were some like activities you did there?
Well, during high school, I said I was on the freshman football team here at Marquette High, but I played softball and basketball through the CYO. They had leagues, so we would do that, and that was a lot of time on weekends and things like that. So I enjoyed doing that. I used to. I was the primary dishwasher at our church fish fries. So the parish that I belonged to, Sacred Heart and St. Francis, had a monthly fish fry, except during the summer, and so they had a dishwasher, kind of an automated thing, but it was someone still had to go collect the dishes and bring them back and rinse them and put them in the racks and send them through the machine, and that's what I did. I did that probably starting in 8th grade all the way through high school, and that was my mother helped out in the kitchen, and I went along, and that's what I did, and it's kind of like, I learned that service, is something that you do. I don't think twice about it. I don't brag about it necessarily, but, my time is what I give,
You mentioned church fish fries. Are there any sort of local traditions or things that are very exclusive to Milwaukee, or things culturally or activity-wise that you've been involved with just in your life in general?
Oh boy, well, fish fries definitely are one. That's definitely a Milwaukee thing. Started with the Germans and the Catholic, traditions, because we couldn't eat meat on Fridays, and so that's why that came about. I can't really think of anything in particular that was related to Milwaukee, or things they just did here.
About some other social things in general?
Yeah, of course the festivals at the lakefront, that started with Henry Meyer, who started Summerfest, and then it spread to all the other festivals, all the other ethnic festivals. State Fair was always a part of something we did, and so it's sometimes those things get blurred about when I got involved in them, whether I was an adult or growing up or whatever. But some things are consistent through the years, but nothing sticks out,
Sure. You mentioned some of the ethnic festivals. I know you've been involved with Irish Fest in the past. Do you have any stories about that or things to tell?
Oh, Irish Fest. Long weekends. No, just enjoying the music, the people. Again, I volunteered. I did, I attended bar. I helped out at the mass. I cleaned up, drove people, here and there, and there was, of course, my children were involved as well. So, make sure that they got there and helped out where they could.
Yeah. Obviously, being Catholic and growing up Catholic, do you remember any changes with Vatican II?
Oh, yes. When I was in grade school at Saint James, I said I lived about a mile away. I was their primary altar boy. This is back when Mass was in Latin, and but because I could get there to the church, on Sunday sometimes I did all 4 masses, because they had 4 masses at this parish anyway. The church wasn't very big. They had most of the masses in the basement of the school, which was also their lunchroom, their where the dances were held. Organizations had things, but anyway, so I was, like I say, their primary altar boy, and when this was all in Latin, when Vatican II came along, which was when I was in high school, there was I was involved in the parish. I moved in, in Sacred Heart in St. Francis. There was a lot of discussions and things ongoing. The hardest part, I think, was for the priests to adapt. The people, it seemed like, well, there were some people who just left because they figured, how can you change from Latin to English, and but there were others that it became a more informal celebration of the Eucharist. It wasn't as rigid, and they liked that and became more open to that. So that was one of the good things that came out of it. Sometimes the people who were very rigid in what they thought or believed, whatever, couldn't handle the changes. But, we enjoyed it. Here it became, they say, it became more open. It was a mixed bag, though, because it was hard for some people. The Latin masses were very, very strict. This way, this way, this way, this way.
Right.
So, being altar server, did you have to learn any Latin?
Oh yes, I don't know if I remember any, but the mass was in Latin. All your responses were in Latin. We said the altar boys said the responses, not the congregation. As they do now. It was strictly the altar boys. And some of the things that when you go to mass now and peace be with you, and the whole congregation says, and with your spirit. But back then it was just the altar boy that would say that, and of course we had a very, very set procedures in how to help the priest, move the missal from one side to the other, wash, take the cruets up, for mixing of the water and the wine, washing of the hands. There was, we were always kneeling at the foot of the altar, but that was very, very strict procedures,
Yeah. Did any of the sort of like the practical stuff change, in addition to the language, but the stuff that you would do as an altar boy with Vatican II, did any of that kind of stuff change? Not
really. I mean, you're there, the altar boys were there to assist the priests and whatever it was. We still, I don't know exactly when the communion railings were taken out, but we used to have the paten that we would walk backwards, put the paten under the people's chin as they were getting communion. I see some places that's back, which to me that's unnecessary, I think, but that's me now. So, but no, they really didn't change a lot. The mass itself really didn't change, just the language of it, and the fact that they're facing the people now instead of having their face to the crucifix in the back of the altar.
Do you think overall that Vatican II was a positive change to the church?
I think so, very much so. Yeah, it opened up people to what the church and its teachings really are. And I think it was a lot of that was hidden. We learned a lot in catechism class at grade school, but it still was very very rigid, and I think the Vatican II opened up everybody to what the church is about.
So, growing up, was there any, what were some things you did was fun, around your neighborhood?
Well, what I did, where I lived was, like I say, this row of houses, and we were on a service drive, which meant we weren't on the main highway. Between the service road and the highway was a space, and I'd say maybe, I want to say 60 feet wide, and that's where we did everything. We played football there, we played baseball there. There was enough kids in the neighborhood we can always have a game of some kind or practice. Of course, we rode bikes everywhere. Once I was working, I was rich. I would go ride a bike over to. They had a grocery store on the corner of 13th and Rawson, and get my soda, or get my Hostess cupcakes, and those are, and we would just, ride our bikes almost everywhere to, and that's how that was fun for me. That's, what I did. Was outside, almost all the time.
How much did that change as you got older and into high school and college?
Well, I became, once I left Oak Creek, then I, was more dependent on other modes of transportation, so to speak. So that restricted me a little bit. I didn't, of course, when I was in grade school, I didn't have a lot of homework, per se. So, once I got, into high school, and that was, more involved in learning and homework and things like that. So, and activities in the school that became more involved than just hanging out with friends.
Right. And you mentioned modes of transport. How old were you when you started driving?
16. I got my license. It was rather funny because I got my license when I turned 16, because at that time, you took a test at the motor vehicle department, and then I had my license when I took driver's education, because I had to take that at the public school, which was only during the summer. And I turned 16 when I was in March, so I got my license shortly after that. And so I had a license when I was taking driver's ed, which when I was that summer I was helping my dad unload beer bottles at the Pabst Brewery overnight, third shift. And so I would have my driver's ed class started about 7 or 8 in the morning. And so I would drive into the parking lot where the cars were parked that I was going to learn how to drive in, and and I'd go to class. I was very lucky that I knew the teacher who lived in our neighborhood, and so he would put me behind the wheel for about 15, 20 minutes, and explain what I was doing or where I was going, and then I got in the back seat and let the other ones, learn how to drive because they didn't, so. But that was a funny experience, for me. That, yeah. And then, we've had a whole. My family did not do well on cars. We had a whole slew of junkers, so to speak. So. But that's what we drove. What was there?
Just out of curiosity, what types of cars did you have?
What type of cars?
Yeah.
Well, we had a Ford station wagon, which was a boat, literally. It was huge. And then there was a Packard that one day I was driving it down the alley, and it had power brakes, but the brakes gave out. And I almost, thank God I remembered the, handbrake, because otherwise I would have went right, God knows where, But it was that the power brake did somehow the fluid leaked out or didn't have enough fluid or something. So, but those are the cars. Yeah. Then my first car was a yellow VW that I got when I was in college. The old kind.
Out of curiosity, so with food, have any food traditions changed? Was there different types of foods that were more popular, back then than there is nowadays?
Right. You mentioned Hostess cupcakes.
Oh yeah, those kinds of things. Yeah. Well, of course, candy and kids and chips and bags of chips were 5 cents and Twinkies, Hostess Twinkies, things like that. The kids, But one thing that was not very prevalent was Mexican food. That's relatively, I shouldn't say new, but it wasn't around back when I was growing up. There was pizza. We had places called Big Boys. I don't know if you ever heard of those, but they were a hamburger place, and they spotted up all over the city. They're great places for kids to meet and hang out. I'm trying to think. There wasn't a lot. The McDonald's, were around, but not as prevalent as they are today. And of course, they were the only outside of Big Boy and McDonald's. There wasn't a lot of other restaurants. No big Burger Kings or Wendy's or anything like that. Those were all came later. So, and then of course there's the top tier restaurants, which kids didn't go to. Maybe on prom night, but that's about it. So.
So you mentioned Mexican food, and I'm curious, if you were to describe to us how much Milwaukee's sort of changed as in relations to race after the civil rights movement, and I guess what has your experience been with that?
Well, I think that, and I don't know exactly when, but Milwaukee was very segregated, very. I mean, you went across the valley, Menominee Valley. There wasn't anything but white families there. Old neighborhoods, old German neighborhoods, old Polish neighborhoods. And the same thing on the north side. There was pockets of nationality, cultures, so to speak. Believe it or not, I think, and this is my opinion, that one of the things that really started the movement of populations was the expressway. because the first bit of expressway went right through an old German section north to the north side. And that also, cut into where the African Americans were. And so that, people wanted to stay in Milwaukee, but they had to spread out. So where do they go at that point in time? And then the same thing happened when you cut through, the downtown and the south side and things like that. All of those neighborhoods got disrupted. And then those people had to go somewhere else. And I think the civil rights movement helped move people, but it also drove people out of town. They drove them, to the suburbs or somewhere else. But the Hispanics, basically took over where the Polish were, so it's still evolving and changing. But I think the expressways were what started it. The movement through the cities that uprooted all these people.
Right. All right. I think that's about good.
Okay.
We've about covered it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, no problem at all.
It was awesome to hear from you.
Hopefully that this will help your project. I didn't, screw up things that will,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you gave me the opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.